What's going on, everyone? So Patrick Beverley's time with the Los Angeles Lakers was very rough and very short-lived, right? When the Lakers went and acquired him, it was thought to be a solid acquisition. Didn't really make a lot of sense with like all the other small guards, but like Patrick Beverley was like, okay, like he could be that pit bull, right? The year prior, him and the Minnesota Timberwolves, they go and they, basically win the NBA championship for them, right? We all remember the celebration and all that stuff. But in a serious note, right? Like it was like, okay, like maybe this makes sense, right? You got a legit 3-and-D style guy. He's the type of player that usually plays really well at the point guard position alongside LeBron James, but it just didn't work. He was literally the worst offensive player in the league for the Lakers. And the best thing that came out of it was the camera hold when LeBron in the Celtics game. Like that was absolutely beautiful. But obviously, he has his podcast, Pat Bev Podcast, and he's now, always talking and speaking on players and has relationships with many players, especially guys that he has played with, such as Anthony Edwards. He played on Minnesota with Anthony Edwards, alongside Anthony Edwards. Again, they won their Super Bowl. We're taking pictures and kissing babies and jumping on the table and stuff like that over making the playoffs and whatnot, which it was a silly moment, but you love the passion, right? You love to see it. Pat Bev, he's a big talker. He loves to talk that talk. He likes to walk the walk, though. I'll give him credit. He does usually, back it up in a lot of ways. But he is a guy that does talk a lot. And one of the things that he talked about in a recent discussion was Anthony Edwards leaving the Minnesota Timberwolves. He stated that Anthony Edwards isn't going to finish his career with Minnesota or any of that, and that he's going to leave for a bigger market. And it makes a lot of sense for Anthony Edwards to do that. In the next, 3 to 5 years, Anthony Edwards could very well be the best player in the league, or at least top 5. I mean, he is far and away the best player on Team USA. He is a legit, just dominant force on both sides of the basketball. That's the key too, right? He's not just a great offensive player. He's still a very young 22-year-old, right? He's 6'4" with like a 6'9" wingspan, can jump through the gym. He uses all of those tools and all of those intangibles to just get after it and be a pit bull on the defensive end. And that's the key, right? When you're talking about the greatest players in the league, it's usually guys that are two-way guys, right? Like Jokic is, and there are rare exceptions, but usually it's like Giannis is but he's a guy that go get you 30 on any given night, but also just completely shut down an offense on the defensive side, right? And Anthony Edwards, on top of being a great defensive guy, he gives you, 1.6 steals per game, gives you just under a block per game. He is a guy that can absolutely get buckets. He is a legit 25, 5, and 5 guy right now. He got 24.6 points last year. He got 5.8 rebounds, 4.4 assists. And he's improved every year since he's been in the league. He's only been in the league 3 years, which feels like he's been in a lot longer, but it's just because of the impact he's already had. And this is a guy that it's not far-fetched to think that he will be a 27 to 30 point a game scorer, probably even this year. We have seen the impact that Team USA has on some of these players, some of these young guys. He's a guy that plays games, right? Played 79 games last season, 72 both seasons the year prior. Granted, he's still very young. That's usually the case. But he's also playing 36 minutes a game. Shoots 50% from the field, 37% from 3 on 8 attempts per game almost for his career. He has an EFG of 52.8%, which is really good, especially for those type of guards. And he just has the attitude and personality of just that alpha dog, that number one guy, the guy that just all he cares about is winning. And if Minnesota doesn't put themselves in a position to win, Anthony Edwards, absolutely, I could see him leaving. And it's something we've talked about here on the channel. But the reason I'm talking about Anthony Edwards is, one, Patrick Beverley said that he wants to leave to go to a play at a bigger market. But we know Austin Reeves and him have really developed a relationship. on top of them really developing a relationship, there have been lots of reports, and even Austin Reeves kind of gave us the hint, hint, wink, wink, that he's recruiting guys, right? That he's speaking to these players, that he's talking to guys. Come to Lakers, right? LeBron's leaving in 2 years. Let's go. Now, Anthony Edwards is like if I could pick anybody on Team USA to come to Lakers, it's Anthony Edwards. Right? Like, he's one of the, 3 or 4 guys that I want, badly on the Lakers, that I want to say, because he just embodies the Lakers to me, right? Like, he's that guy that I just think you'd look at, just, it would be, I'm not saying he's going to be as good or polarizing or anything like that, but like the modern day Kobe, that killer instinct, that guy that close game, guy that just plays both sides of the ball, gets after it, that alpha male, that dominant figure. Like, I could see him kind of being that guy for the Lakers. And I love that. Obviously, I'd love Jason Tatum. Problem with Tatum is that he doesn't have, if you gave Tatum Anthony Edwards mentality, I think Tatum would be the best player in the league now. Right? Because Tatum can do everything. Great defensive guy, both sides of the ball, go get you 40 a night, right? Can score at all 3 levels, play, make, do everything. He doesn't really seem to have that dog in him. But Jason Tatum is definitely another option. Luka, Giannis, if we get Giannis. Those are the guys that that I really want. But Anthony Edwards is right there. He's top 4, top 5 for me. Seriously. I might even take, because you look at the roster that we have, even post LeBron, I might even take Anthony Edwards over Luka. Because Luka's just so ball dominant, so, ISO heavy at times, right? Anthony Edwards could be that too, but he's just so much more explosive. And I just think Luka alongside Reeves might be a little clunky and awkward, where I think Reeves at the point and Anthony Edwards at the 2 would just be a perfect fit. I really do. I just think fit-wise, you look at, imagine a starting 5 of Austin Reeves, Anthony Edwards, Jared Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura, and Anthony Davis. That would be great defensively. That would be great offensively. You'd have the 2 stars. Come on. That's a team that could contend for years. The problem is Anthony Edwards and his contract. So Anthony Edwards isn't a free agent until 2029. So he signed that new, 5-year deal or whatever, and it doesn't kick in until 2024, 2025. And he's due $35.5 million that year. Then next year, 38.5, 41, 44, and then 46 in 2028, 2029. He would only be 27 years old when all is said and done. Now, obviously, if he wants out sooner, right, then that's always a possibility. But even then, you're talking at least 3 years, right? You're talking at least until the end of the 2026, 2027 season. Because then going into 27, 28, he'd have 2 years left on his deal. Maybe if he kind of really pushes, maybe Minnesota would trade him at that point. And then he would have to kind of push for the Lakers. But by that point, we could have a completely different roster. Who knows where our roster is at? That's the only sort of caveat for Anthony Edwards. Look, if there's any way for you to get Anthony Edwards, you go get Anthony Edwards, right? By the time he's available to be traded, he could be the best player in the league, top 5 at worst. I really do think he, in a couple years, will be top 5 in the league. I genuinely do. Or at least in that conversation, in that argument, right? I don't think he'll be worse than top 10 in a couple years, right? Because he plays both sides of the ball, and he's so good. And, in 3 years, a lot of these guys are going to start being at the back end, right? We have Anthony Davis through 2028, 2029, and that's probably going to be the end of Anthony Davis. So even when we could get Anthony Edwards wouldn't be LeBron James' replacement. He would end up being Anthony Davis's replacement, which sucks, right? Because I really would love to see what Anthony Edwards and Anthony Davis looks like, right? Is that like our modern like Shaq and Kobe? Like that could be pretty cool. Again, not saying that they're as good or anything, not comparing the two in that regard, but just like, give us that modern day comparison, right? Like the big little duo. I think that would be brilliant. But that's the problem, is that if Anthony Edwards didn't sign that new extension, then yeah. Could he be a future Laker at some point? Sure. If you have the opportunity to make him a future Laker at some point, do you? Absolutely. But it's something that you just can't get your hopes up anytime soon, right? I mean, Austin Reeves might not even be a Laker anymore by the time Anthony Edwards is actually available and able to come to Lakers. Or what happens if you end up having to do a trade, right? Like what happens if you end up having to trade for Anthony Edwards, right? And say 3-4 years, you're probably going to have to give up Austin Reeves, right? So even though Austin Reeves is kind of campaigning and pushing for Anthony Edwards, and as much as I would love to see those two on the court together, there is a real likelihood that probably won't ever happen, even if Anthony Edwards comes to Lakers. Because again, you probably are going to have to make a trade for him, and Austin Reeves would probably have to be included in that deal. Unless, a Max Christie or somebody else like really emerges, or like a Shafino or something like that, to where like you got this clunkiness a little bit. And it's like, oh, well, Shafino's like a 25-5-5 guy. And it's like, well, we'll give you Shafino, we'll give you Lewis, who's like a 15-8 guy or something like that. I'm not saying that they will be that, but I'm just saying like, that's your hope, is that like somebody else other than Austin Reeves becomes really good, but they're not like Anthony Edwards level good, to where it's like, okay, we could sacrifice those guys, trade for Anthony Edwards. Now you got Reeves and Edwards, plus hopefully Rui's still around at that point, things like that. But I mean, again, like our roster could look completely different. Like we could have a completely different team. And I mean, everybody that's on the roster now we might not have anybody on the current roster right now that would be there when Anthony Edwards is available, right? So just something to keep in mind. But if there's ever a way that we can get Anthony Edwards, get him. He's one of the few players in the NBA that like I like desperately want to see in a Laker jersey. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? Do you think Anthony Edwards is a future Laker? What do you think of Pat Bev's comments? How do you feel? What your thoughts are? Let me know down in the comments.